Reach is such a key factor in combat sports. We've all heard the coach call out use your reach,
Yeah,
but
almost.
very often it's a cue used for longer rangier fighters. Now, I've been a long and rangy fighter at a lightweight class, as well as a shorter, more dense fighter at a heavier weight class that just happens to have a pretty long reach.
Yes.
But in each situation, my range was always the key to making sure that my striking doesn't come up short in the exchange. But how do we really get power at the
Yeah.
end of our range? I'm a big fan of training full range of motion throughout the body, but how important is it that there's coordination with the tools that we have at the end of our limbs? These, of course, being our hands and feet. You don't have to go too far to see the difference in performance the moment someone is able to activate the full range of motion. Over the last few years, the conversation of grip strength and foot strength has reached the mainstream fitness listener, with both being an indicator of longevity, an influencer of our efficiency of movement, as well as a tool to help prevent injury further up the chain. But it's a concept that martial artists have used for centuries. When teaching calisthenics, a common complaint I hear from people is that they struggle with their grip when they're on the bar. This is a complaint that can correlate over to heavy effort compound weightlifting as well. So when it comes to pull-ups, I always advise people to use a crushing grip. If you're using a hook grip for your pull-up, you're missing out on a lot of the available activation in the forearm that actually influences the initial stage of the pull-up before the bicep and tricep reach that agonistic and antagonistic contractions. These connect the upper quadrant of the torso and the core, including the shoulders, traps, lats, and upper pecs. With the lower quadrant of the core engaged, we reach this state even quicker, which is why a hook grip can still be used and can appear very stable when done correctly. But once again, with a relaxed forearm, we're in a state of extension when we get to the crux of the pull up, rather than utilizing the stabilized tension provided by all of the third class levers throughout the arm. The crushing grip also allows us to channel cross body strength much better. Perform any upper body or arm exercise as you normally would, and then really focus on how much tension you're using to grip the bar or the handle. You'll immediately see a difference in your ability to move that weight. Now try a unilateral upper body exercise with the same grip and make a strong fist on your opposite side. You can feel how much more tension you're able to channel through the stabilizing side, allowing you to perform a much more stable and efficient movement with the primary side actually performing the exercise. So we can see how our grip can affect our longevity and movements and exercises with weight. You came here to learn about how it affects your striking. If you watch martial artists like Bruce Lee punching or experienced practitioners performing karate katas or kung fu forms, a trait we often see is a closing of the fist at the final stage, closest to the full extension of the strike. This is an intentional action that can dramatically affect the way that we punch. If you look at a pitch in baseball, the pitcher is able to apply a huge amount of velocity to the ball due to the relaxed state of the arm's fascial chains, while developing the elastic tension from the functional lines storing energy before the final stage of the pitch. When we talk about punches coming from the feet, it's not about the twist or angle of the foot so much. This can be a teaching tool for beginners because most commonly, people don't use their hips without having their feet placed in a position that forces use of the hips, unless you're from a nation or culture that dances. The muscular and fascial adaptations we are relying on for explosive movements like sprinting, pitching a ball, jumping, punching, and kicking is called the stretch shortening cycle. This is a way for the body to elastically load the connective tissues before relaying the force through the fascial lines of the body in order to complete the movement with additional force that's been previously stored within the loaded connect chain, rather than just the force facilitated as a muscular contraction. This is a key reason as to why the bench presser in his first boxing class punches like he's doing a dumbbell press. His motor units are accustomed to the bilateral or unilateral contractions of an isolated muscle group, as opposed to channeling a connect chain to distribute force. So he very often appears stiff due to the consistent contraction of the muscle, trying to hit the target with as much force as the muscle group can generate. Now, the difference with throwing a punch to pitching a ball is that we're hitting a target at the end of that connect chain rather than launching a projectile from that connect chain. So we're going to experience feedback from the target that isn't something that the pitcher has to worry about. So going back to Bruce Lee's 1 inch punch as an example, Bruce always started with his hand open on the target that he's striking, the fingers pointed directly at the target that he wants to hit. Bruce generates elastic force through his body before engaging a fist at the final stage of the punch and displacing the target. Considering the points that we made earlier about the crushing grip, allowing us to fully connect the forearm and upper arm musculature with the upper quadrant of the torso, think back to the additional weight we're able to move when we're using the crushing grip. In order to move weight against gravity, we need to produce more force in weight than the weight that we're trying to move. In the example of the bodybuilder again, if we're tensing throughout and trying to move that weight throughout the movement, we will counteract the velocity speed aspect due to the intent of the contraction. Now imagine the batter dealing with the pitcher. The velocity of the ball will influence the amount of velocity in distance that the batter can apply to the ball if he gets a perfect strike. What happens if the ball flying at however many 100 miles an hour multiplied in weight the moment before impact? We rarely notice the moment in combat sports without really paying attention. In boxing and kickboxing, it can be harder to notice due to the gloves. But the beauty of the 4 ounce glove can give us examples in the best strikers in MMA and the elite Muay Thai fighters in one championship. The Punch Doctor is a great YouTube channel for strikers, and I encourage you to check out his stuff. But he addresses this concept at the final stage of the punch, the grip of the fist. Utilizing the velocity built in the stretch shortening cycle, the closing of the fist with a crushing grip just before impact allows the solid musculature connecting along the arm chain to amplify the weight at the very end of the punch, allowing the most transferable weight possible piggyback on the speed generated throughout the combined kinetic chain stretch shortening cycles. This can make a huge difference to the flow of your punches and your ability to punch with force. Speed kills, and this is one of the reasons why. Now, it's all well and good, but a lot of people don't feel they're strongest at the most extended part of their extremities. Depictions of strength are commonly displayed with flexion, with the weakest ranges of motion most often being at the furthest points of extension. The arms, in particular, are a series of third class levers from the shoulder down to the fingertips, which means that they're at a mechanical disadvantage because the load bearing point is longer than the point that applies the effort. Third class levers are primers for velocity in engineering. But the beauty of the muscles, fascia, and connective tissues is that they aren't static in their usage or development, unlike a manufactured lever. The body is an amazing tool and can adapt its capabilities under almost any forms of stress. The use of full range of motion is a very important way to train, especially when it comes to translating force into the extension of our strikes. In order to be able to channel as much force as possible, the body needs to be able to effectively transfer the elastic tension and energy from the source through to the extremity, and that requires strength and the stability in order to do so. Straight arm strength is a strength component not commonly focused on in traditional weight training outside of certain isometric exercises, but it is a consistent training point in activities that prioritize movement of body weight or positioning under load, such as calisthenics, gymnastics, and Olympic lifting. Straight arm or leg strength is the capacity for the ability to do the thing that weight training dictates as a categorical no-no, and that's locking out the limb that's supporting the weight. For a health and safety standpoint, it makes sense when coaching an individual new to lifting that they should never lock out their arm or leg because it means the area with the least tensile strength furthest away from the point of contraction can avoid overextension in the event of a loss of stability or form. This is particularly important for high repetitions, but this is something that as combat athletes and martial artists, we experience quite often. And from beginner through to professional, we all know the feeling of an overextended elbow from throwing a jab. One of my earliest shorts on this channel was a video about using resistance bands to counterbalance this problem and program neural stability in the elbow by challenging the lower portions of the biceps and triceps and the upper portion of the forearm. The beauty of resistance bands is that the consistent line of force can be channeled in a specific direction. A weight has to answer to gravity, whereas a resistance band's force is strictly directional from its point of origin to its point of extension, which allows you to challenge the body in many more specific ranges of motion than you can with weight. Tendons develop differently to muscles, so the body will do its best to work around the tendon in the event of an injury. So in order to apply strain and encourage activation, we need to call upon something that is called viscoelastic creep. Viscoelastic creep occurs with a prolonged shortening of a muscle that encourages the tendon to slowly lengthen in response, almost a direct opposite version of the stretch shortening cycle. Imagine you stretch an elastic band to its limit quickly and repeatedly. You'll gradually see fraying developing at the weakest, most extended points until it's no longer able to sustain the same amount of force that it was before the repeated stretching. The tendon works the same way, and because they prefer stiffness to promote movement, they'll fight against the extension of the muscle, which can cause further fraying if there are any injuries present in the tendon. The same way that we need to use an injured muscle to activate muscle protein synthesis and incur blood flow to increase the nutrient intake and recovery, the same is required for the tendon. But the tendons aren't able to stretch and activate collagen synthesis without this viscoelastic creep state that occurs under prolonged tension. And this is why isometric holds and exercises are so important to the development of straight limb strength, to maximize the stability and utilization of full ranges of motion. Combined with what is called in-series hypertrophy, which is the lengthening of a muscle, we can see how we can really begin to improve our strength along our reach and understand how the development of the ape index contributes to the almost superhuman strength and feats that we see climbers able to perform. So straight limb strength plus full range of motion connected chains plus grip strength will really help us to improve our ability to deliver stronger direct strikes. Because of the type of training I enjoy, I'm always working these sorts of things throughout the year. But to give an example of programming leading up to competition, assuming that the skills training of our sports is consistent throughout, I've put together a few things that I particularly like to do with a time frame that I like to do them in. So if you think about it in a way that you're building most of your strength adaptation and your general strength conditioning and power training leading up to your fight camp, and the same goes for your skills, I'd say we shouldn't be trying to learn new things in fight camp. You should be trying to refine the things you do well and tailor them to the things that you may come across in competition. So I try to aim for a guaranteed 2 days a week doing strength conditioning for the first 4 to 6 weeks. I tend to split my training in a method that I call the X split, which goes along the body's natural ways of moving weight. So upper anterior, which is the front of your body, with lower posterior, the backs of your legs, along with some rotation. So imagine the full body being used to push against something. Then lower anterior, the front of the legs, with upper posterior, your back, combined with rotation. Imagine the body pulling something as well. So week by week, building and improving strength and power for the first 4 to 6 weeks, I like using complex training, which utilizes the post-activation potentiation component. What that means is that it's loading the motor neurons of the muscle to activate as many as possible before attempting a high velocity focused movement along the same movement pattern. So you start with something heavier, a large heavy weight, and then go to something explosive. So a heavy leg press, for example, followed by squat jumps. For week one, I'm using moderate training. So 75%, looking at like 5+ reps. Week two, I go heavy, so 80 to 85%, going up to 5 reps. Week three, we're back down to moderate, 75%, 5+ reps again. And the final week, we're going very heavy. We're looking at the maximal reps, absolute strength, 90% to 95% of our 1 rep max, aiming for about 1 to 3 reps. With the added utilization of grip strength and isometric work in there for straight limb strength, if time permits, I'll try and follow that with a deload week and mostly just do calisthenics training and free movement training. But if not, I jump straight into my athletic power. Let me know in the comments if you would like to see a video covering that sort of training in more depth. 2 weeks before the competition, that's deload time. We're going to be at or close to our peak strength from the training at that point. So a focus on speed is now going to benefit massively. Now that we've developed our maximal strength, speed depletes first, so it's logical that we aim for peaking that last. With the development of strength maintaining with activity, we're ensuring that we utilize the force that we've been able to produce in a sport-specific fashion and adding the focus on velocity. Straight arm strength turns into fascial line training, and grip strength becomes more tailored to the specific application. So I tend to like reaction-based grip strength work to start the workout, warm me up, get my brain firing, and fire at the motor units that need to be primed for anything that I'm going to do throughout the session. My guaranteed 2 days becomes 3 to 4 auto-regulated days. Auto-regulation is kind of going based on how the body feels. So if you do feel like you've done a lot of skills training in the week, maybe you've had some final sparring. I like to slow down my sparring in the last 2 weeks before a fight, but some people like to keep sparring going up until their final week. So depending on how you're feeling with what you're doing in training can sort of change whether or not you want to go to 2 days, 3 days, or 4. But I like 3 to 4 personally, to then start focusing on my athletic qualities leading into the competition. In that previous pattern, what I'd be doing strength and power wise, changing the sparring up for my skill sessions now starts to become speed strength or strength endurance days. And this can include pad work with plyometrics or explosive exercises. Let me know if you'd like to hear a little bit more about any of the things that I've discussed in this video. I hope you've enjoyed it and potentially have some new things to take away for your own training, or at least an idea of some stuff that you want to start to work on. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And once again, let me know if there's anything else you want to learn about in the comments.